Hi, my name is Haiqa Arain. I'm a third-year undergraduate physics student at the University of Windsor. Today, I'm going to be presenting on behalf of our group and the research conducted by our master's student, Jeremy Marvin, who has recently graduated. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak with you about the use of silver microparticles for spectrum emission enhancement during laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy of bacterial specimens. I would like to thank my advisor, Dr. Stephen Rehse, and my colleagues for their guidance and help. I would also like to thank our sponsors, NSERC USRA, and the Outstanding Scholars Program at the University of Windsor. The ongoing antibacterial resistance crisis has been a subject of research for decades and is a growing global concern. A major contributing factor to this issue is the lack of technology to diagnose pathogens quickly enough to begin targeted treatment. Our current methods require 24 to 72 hours to detect a strain of bacteria, which leads to the use of broad-spectrum drugs, or a single drug used to eliminate multiple species of bacteria. Our goal is to develop a technique to rapidly identify the type of bacterial infection in a clinical setting, so initiation of appropriate therapy is possible. If the strain of bacteria can be detected immediately when symptoms start to present themselves, targeted treatment will improve patient outcomes, decrease use of broad-spectrum drugs, decrease rates of antibacterial resistance, decrease death rates for deadly bacterial diseases, and reduce clinical wait times for the diagnosis of bacterial infections. The method that we have chosen to investigate is laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, or LIBS. Our group has been researching the use of LIBS for detection, classification, and quantification of several species of bacteria. The goal is to develop a method to rapidly identify a bacterial infection in clinical specimens such as blood, urine, or spinal fluid. LIBS is a rapid spectrochemical technique that utilizes lasers to ablate a target into a microplasma and measure its elemental composition. A high-energy laser pulse vaporizes a target into a microplasma and results in excited atoms, electrons, and ions at high temperatures. When the atoms de-excite to their ground level, they release photons, they release energy in terms of a characteristic photon. The photons, then dispersed by a spectrometer, result in an emission spectrum. The resulting emission lines can then be analyzed to identify and quantify the elements present in the target. The experimental setup we use to perform LIBS can be seen in this figure on the right. At the top right corner, we have a 1064 nanometer laser with a 10 nanosecond pulse duration. The pulse travels through a polarizing beam splitter, and a portion goes to a beam dump, attenuating to 8 millijoules per pulse at the target. The target is ablated inside of a plexiglass chamber containing argon gas, and the microplasma emissions are directed in an optical fiber and amplified using matched parabolic reflectors. The fiber is also connected to an E-shell spectrometer for the dispersion and detection of light emitted by the plasma. The method our lab uses to prepare a sample of bacteria as a LIBS target is illustrated in this flow chart. A bacteria water suspension is deposited onto a metal plate and is heated. A dampened clinical swab used in hospitals and clinic is used to swab the metal plate and then placed inside of a test tube and vortexed. The samples are vortexed to shake off the bacterial cells from the swab into the water. The sample needs to be concentrated over a small area for LIBS to detect a signal. So an aluminum cone with a 1 millimeter diameter was designed to concentrate that bacteria. A filter is mounted on a custom centrifuge insert, and the aluminum cone and the insert are placed inside of a test tube. The bacteria water is then pipetted into the apparatus, and the test tube is placed inside of a centrifuge for water to pass through the cone and filter, and the remaining bacteria is concentrated over a small surface area on the filter. The resulting filter is then mounted on a piece of steel and is ready for LIBS. The final image is how a sample appears when it's shot by a laser. The laser is incident from above, and light is collected from the sides using mirrors as mentioned earlier. The resulting spectrum looks something like this. This spectrum results from a single laser pulse and takes 1 second to acquire. As can be seen, inorganic elements present in bacteria such as magnesium, calcium, sodium, and phosphorus are represented in peaks on the spectrum. The surrounding area is noise. A carbon peak is present due to the filter in argon from argon in the chamber. In this spectrum, the ratio of signal to noise is very high. However, this is an idealistic case because the signal to noise ratio can be much lower. As the number of bacteria decreases, the signal also decreases, especially as seen in this magnesium and calcium. Since an infectious dose of bacteria is very low in a clinical setting, it is necessary to further investigate the enhancement of the signal to noise ratio. We found that another group had been using nanoparticles to enhance emission intensity for LIBs. It was found that the interaction between the incident laser beam and nanoparticles created a plasmon resonance, which increased the electric field and induced a quicker target breakdown into a plasma. On the other hand, microparticles are much easier to acquire and are cheaper. We decided to conduct an investigation and observe effects on emission intensity since no other group had done that yet. However, there were a few obstacles to overcome when using microparticles. Unlike nanoparticles, microparticles do not suspend evenly in water and in fact tend to clump together. Since microparticles could not be deposited on the filter the same way nanoparticles were, a method of even distribution of microparticles on the filter had to be investigated. A 3-piece device constructed from plexiglass was designed and built for the distribution of microparticles. A hollow cube with an opening to contain silver microparticles, a filter to insert inside of the cube, and a stopper to seal the cube. The device is filled with 5 milligrams of silver microparticles ranging from 0.5 to 1 micron in diameter. First, the cube is sealed with the stopper and manually shaken for the dispersal of microparticles. This is the shaking time. After a waiting period, which allows the heavier microparticles to settle, a filter holder is inserted inside of the chamber to allow for microparticles to settle on top of the filter. This is the settling time. However, we needed to develop this technique and optimize the dispersion of microparticles to allow for a standardized deposition of microparticles. An experiment was designed to test 5 settling times of 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and 50 seconds. The filters were weighed before and after the microparticle deposition. The optimal settling time for the chamber was found to be 30 seconds, as 10 seconds did not allow enough time for microparticles to settle on the filter, and 50 seconds was too much time, resulting in scorching of the filter. A 10-second wait time and shaking time was also selected. We found that the deposition rate of the microparticles on the filter was 1.36 micrograms per second. As can be seen in this graph, there is roughly a linear relationship between the mass deposition and the chamber settling time. We observed an enhancement of the bacterial spectrum when silver microparticles were used. As can be seen in this spectrum, the red peaks are from the use of silver microparticles, and blue peaks are without the use of silver. We also see emission lines from silver as well, but they don't overlap with other bacterial elemental lines. Therefore, they can be ignored. We found that the amplification of bacteria varied from species and by element. This variation by element is due to the varying spectral properties of the elements themselves and their interaction with the electrons in the silver. The carbon from the filter experienced much less enhancement than elements present in the bacteria. The phosphorus signals were also present. The variation of the same element by species is something we currently cannot explain, but is still being investigated by our group. With the construction of a chamber, we were able to evenly disperse microparticles on a filter, as shown in this image on the right. The crater in the center is from ablation, and the surrounding white dots are the silver, which we can zoom into. In this image, the silver is in white and can be seen sitting on top of the filter, which is in the background. We found in our 30-second settling time, 39 plus or minus 17 milligrams of silver deposited on each filter. We then ablated a 75 micron crater, which resulted in a mass coverage of 3.3 nanograms per laser shot, which is a really small mass. We deposited bacteria on filter and observed an average enhancement ratio of 4 to 5. Some lines that were too small to be visible before were then visible, like phosphorus. Were visible after the use of silver, like phosphorus. We determined that although the enhancement mechanism for microparticles and nanoparticles were not the same, the presence of microparticles increased the plasma temperature and the electron density, which resulted in a higher signal-to-noise ratio. In the future, we would like to explore if nanoparticles are a more efficient solution to boosting signal-to-noise ratio. We would also like to investigate other metallic microparticles such as copper. We want to improve on our current technique for deposition of microparticles in the chamber. As of now, the deposition of silver microparticles in the chamber result in a collection of microparticles at the brim, as seen here in figure 13. We would like to eliminate this excess powder by developing new techniques. We would like to further optimize the settling and waiting times for microparticle enhancement and produce more reproducible results. These are all ideas that I will be working on this summer as an NSERC USRA student along with my colleagues. Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.